Good evening and welcome to Amplify, a telephone talk show that looks at life from a religious perspective. I'm Father Ronald Lenguin, hoping that you have felt the warmth of God's love in your life this day, especially the joy you experience when you share God's love with others. I would like to begin our program, as we do each week, with a story that is based on faith, informed with imagination, the kind of way of introducing our guest and our topic for this evening. Jesus was pleased at what he saw, but Peter was both surprised and shocked. Coming up the road toward them were 6 people with crutches and canes to support them. They were also leaning on one another for comfort and support. Peter said, "Master, I must go and help them." Jesus shook his head, raised his arm, and said, "No, Peter, let them come alone." Peter protested, "But Master, is there no compassion in your heart for them?" Jesus smiled and replied, "My son, soon you will understand." Slowly and with much struggle, the 6 continued to make their way toward Jesus. When they finally reached him, there was a smile of relief on each of their tired-looking, wrinkled, sun-beaten faces. Jesus greeted them, "Welcome, my friends. It is good to see you." They were happy to receive the water Peter gave them because their lips were dry from thirst. And one of them asked if he could have some water to splash on his face. And so Peter poured the precious fluid into his cupped hands, and the old man wet his sun-baked skin with it. Then he said to Jesus, "Master, I'm old and tired, and I have no one to care for me." Another said, "Master, my eyes have grown dim, and I can no longer see. I can't even see my hand when I hold it in front of my eyes. My son and his son work hard in the fields in order to feed me and care for me." Jesus asked, "Did they do it willingly?" "Oh, yes," he answered. "I can't complain, for they are very good to me." One of the old women began to cry and complain, "Oh, Master, Master, it hurts when I walk even a few steps. But I knew you would heal me if I came to you. You will, won't you?" Another man who leaned heavily on a crutch said, "Master, my legs pain me too. There are open sores on them. The worst part is that I can no longer work in the fields. So I must beg at the gates and depend on those who are willing to share one of their coins with me." Still another of the 6 said, "Yes, Master, I'm old too. But it's my chest that hurts. It's hard to even breathe. I don't even feel like eating, but I know I'll grow weak like a child if I don't." After each of them had finished complaining, Jesus said to them, "My friends, it is not wrong for you to complain because you have good reason. But I tell you this is the time in life that you should be thinking about your children and those who have deeply touched your lives. Those who are growing old have more time to teach children about the Heavenly Father. For there is much knowledge and wisdom stored deep within your heart, your mind, and your soul. Teach the young. Share your wisdom with them. Show them how to pray to our Creator and explain why prayer is so important. Do not curse God or the darkness, but offer your pain to Him. Tell Him you know your time is short and that you want to teach the young about His love for whatever time is left to you, whether it be a few minutes, a few days, a few weeks, or a few years. A story of faith and imagination. Our guest writes in the book that she has written most recently, "Don't Call Me Old, I'm Just Awakening, Spiritual Encouragement for Later Life." Spiritual awakening, we are told by mystic author Evelyn Underhill, is an elevation of consciousness sparked by our conviction that we are more than the flesh, that God, or the highest life, power, and intelligence, is in hand, and that we are somehow at one with that life, that divine love. Spiritual awakening lifts so many sad moods linked to aging, melancholy, the anxiety born of our sense of mortality, our feelings of isolation. Awakening brings with it the certainty that the Lord is our shepherd, that we shall never want. Thus do we savor some bit of sublime imperishability while here on earth. Only this taste of the divine love restores us. It blesses old age, quote unquote, with a lavish feel. The advanced years that once seemed so chilly now warm us, seem a winter long past. At our ground of being, we meet each day as an opportunity to align ourselves with the everlasting reality that heals. Thus my title. While to others we may appear old, graying, dated, antique, in our heart of hearts, we're just realizing the joy, the beauty, the sacred depths of life. How ironic that what looks to the senses as the end of life is truly the beginning. Marsha Sinetar is the best-selling author of Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow, and Ordinary People as Monks and Mystics, books that close the gap between the material and the spiritual. She is one of America's foremost exponents on the practical value of mature spirituality. She currently lives in the Pacific Northwest, where she is creating a sanctuary for contemplative spirituality, helping professionals to do what they love. And she has had a long life, a lifelong love affair with human talent of every sort. Marsha Sinetar, welcome back to Amplify.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Father Lenguin, and what a gorgeous story you started with.
Thank you. It's been too long. As I mentioned you on the phone, it seems like we missed one of your books.
Well, I'm going to send you one. As soon as I can get a hold of it, you're going to get a copy, and then we'll see what's what on that one.
Good. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the state of your sanctuary.
Well, right now it's only online. And as a matter of fact, this Friday I'm going to meet with a few colleagues to see what we can do to actually put some physical structure to it. It's pretty tough to live a contemplative writer's life as I do, and then on the one hand, and on the other hand, want to create something quiet and small for people who want to learn more about contemplative living. But we'll get it together.
Where did, or how did your lifelong love affair with human talent of every sort begin? Is it just part of your nature?
Well, I think I have a call to be a teacher. And, of course, I started out in public instruction and then moved into my own human resource practice when I began to write about these subjects that we're talking about, creative living and a worshipful life like that. I would have to say that the love of talent seems to be something that is beyond age. In other words, I see it in the very young, talented and gifted one-year-olds practically, and I see it in the very old, in centenarians who are still sparkling with what we can only call the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's just so obvious to me that if we're looking at aging, what we call aging, this is a perfect season to be developing that sparkle.
And before people start turning their dials or switching to some other station because it says, don't call me old, I'm just awakening, and it's spiritual encouragement for later life. Yeah. This book is not just for older adults, is it?
No, this is really, basically I'm setting out a framework to people of all ages, saying, look, there are some things that we can actually do early on in life that will make all of life vital and fun and joyful, and we'll, you said in your story, let them come alone, Jesus said. Well, I think this walking out of our talent is something we do alone. We make our decisions to live fully in the deepest recesses of our heart, and then we have to walk it out in daily life. So, in a sense, this is a book for everybody.
And you speak about mutual encouragement, and that's what will sustain some of the joys of companionship.
You know, really, there are some competencies, if I can call it that, some skills. And again, this is whatever age you are. And one of the ones I see again and again in people that are robustly enjoying their lives is this ability to connect with other people, to stay connected, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through. You know, there was a CNN study, and this, of course, will relate to anybody who's listening, and it talked about the loss of jobs that is happening in the U.S. right at this time, after 9/11 specifically, and reported that there was a depression that resulted from that job loss that could last up to 2 years. So one of the ameliorating factors in this sense that we're alone in the dark times of our life, of course, comes from a life of worship. But another one comes from our companions. And I think it's a skill to connect with those people that won't let us feel sorry for ourselves and give us a good kick in the pants when we need it, give us a joke when we need it, be there when we call on the phone, that type of thing. And, of course, we have to do it for others as well.
If indeed we are to learn more about the concept of successful aging, or we will want to if we are to believe the facts that accompany the publicity materials about this book that came from Paulus Press. And the facts there are, first of all, the number of people over age 85 will quadruple by the year 2050.
Right.
If you're alive in the year 2020, which isn't really that far away, and I would be 80 years old by that time.
Yeah, you'll be here, God willing, and me too, and probably most of our audience.
But the thing about it is, if you're alive in the year 2020, there's a good chance you'll live into your hundreds.
That's right. That's right. And this is so exciting. It's exciting if you have a model of aging in your mind. You know, one of the points that I'm making in this book, and of course, again, this works for any age, that we merge with what we notice. And one of the models that we've been given of aging is kind of disease and deprivation. In fact, people don't even like to hear about anything related to aging because of that. But what I'm suggesting is that we have a new model. And that new model, we can look at people who are 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, and find individuals who are totally inspiring. For example, if you look at Mike Wallace and the whole crew on 60 Minutes, which is one of the most popular shows on air today and has been for years and years. He's in his 80s. If you look at the Supreme Court justices, most of them are in their 80s. People like Eartha Kitt in their 80s. Mary Baker Eddy, when she was in her 80s, she founded the Christian Science Monitor, which is still going strong today. And I'm not suggesting only famous people, but you can look at your own neighborhood and see individuals, and I'm suggesting that we do this, that we activate a kind of hunting process, an observation process, and look at people who are living well way, way into later life. And this is exciting for us then because it's encouraging.
And so as I read from the preface of your book, what looks to the senses as the end of life is truly the beginning, and what most of us have considered to be over the hill has changed. Definitely
has changed. But here again, I'm really, I'm speaking on two levels. On the one level, I'm talking about what we notice in active elderly all around us, that there is that sea change. On the other hand, I'm talking on a deeper level, and I'm saying that if we have that prayerful communion with God, the time of life when we get that reward of that is where we realize that, like it says in I think the book of Exodus, that God has set eternity in our hearts. So this life is just it's just such a short time in a way for us to learn that and step into that eternity joyfully.
Mm-hmm. And so what you're telling us throughout the book is that we need to rethink our old false assumptions, that we should discuss our lives in spiritual terms, not ageist, that spiritual awakening stirs our longing for the new or the familiar, the untried, the impossible dream.
Well,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you've put your finger right on it when you talk about assumptions, because it's our assumptions that shape our reality. And we don't appreciate how much that is true on a day-to-day basis. You know, George Burns, the comedian, used to say when people asked him, how did you live so long and how could you still be entertaining people and you're 99 years old or whatever he was. And he said that the thing that he did was to fall in love with his future.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to what I was saying about depression, that when we lose a job, we're depressed because something that we fell in love with for the future has been taken from us. Of course, this happens when we lose a friend or when we lose a parent or whatever. But we can cultivate that joy if we understand the principle behind it. And the principle is we have to recreate ourselves and fall in love with something new in the future.
And that happens when we begin, you write, to center ourselves in the spirit, to awaken spiritually, and then that is to endure, that we can sense something sacred in the invisible. I'm always fascinated by the mysteries of life around us, because I think there is so much to, maybe not always to learn from them, although there is something to learn, as much as to experience from them and to learn in that sense. And to understand that, as you write, at the ground of our being, we are ageless and we never old, because there is a part of our being that is eternal. It never ages.
That's exactly right. And you know, there was no beginning and there is no end to it. And that, of course, is our spirit, the soul. And you know, I have sometimes we talk in this way and people say, oh, yes, but what does that mean in practical terms? Well, in practical terms, it's on an individual basis. And that's why I recommend we look around us. For example, I have a neighbor who's in his 80s. He's lived here on this remote coast of Northern California, where I am most of the time. He's totally blind, and I think he's been blind since birth. Now, there are people who can't live in the country at 20 years old alone, and here he is blind, and he's lived alone all of his life. And he must exercise or something, because I recently saw him in the market, and he looks extremely buff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He looks very, he's tan, he's healthy, his cheeks have color. He has a college student that takes him around on what I suppose is his errand run. And I was amazed that he looks better today than he looked when I first moved here 20 years ago. So this is what I mean by walking out that interior vitality. So something starts that's joyful on the inside, a little seed that we have planted, some kind of enthusiasm. And then, little by little, we begin to express that outwardly, so that other people around us are taken up with it. And you brought up earlier the point of encouragement teams. I think we encourage people just by the way we walk into a room.
Mm-hmm.
And the point I make also in this book, and it's been a bias of mine for a long, long time, and that is that as we get older, we have a responsibility to keep ourselves inspiring other people.
Yes.
It's not their responsibility to pick us up all the time. And this is harsh words, but I think that's sort of what Jesus was saying, too.
Right. They're harsh words, but perhaps it's only because it's a difficult lesson for some to believe. Because you point out that when we are inordinately fearful of aging, it means that we have neglected life's spiritual dimension. And that's where I think that whole aspect of education that is so important to you, that we learn our boredoms, you write, our apathies and our regressive responses to the world around us, especially when we feel old and useless. So we can learn those lessons, and we can pay attention to that, or we can pay close attention to what is happening within us.
That's right. And along those lines about learning, there was a study that I quote that looked at senior athletes. As a matter of fact, yes. They found 3 traits in the senior athletes that they are recommending to other people who want to remain, who want to live well all of life. And the first one is, and all of these, by the way, are educational. First is to stay current. These are people that read the paper, and they learn computer and email. They read books. They go out with friends and so forth. But they're current. The second one we've talked about, and that is to be open to new friends. And you really need your friends, because the older you get, the more likely it is that you're either going to move or somebody's going to move away from you or maybe pass away. So you want to stay connected to other people and not have that be such a trauma every time something changes in your life that you lose track of people that you care for. And the third one is probably the most difficult to discuss, and that is to have a semblance of control in your life. Now, everybody can't be in control, let's say, financially, or maybe one has to move to a different neighborhood. But I'm suggesting this aspect of control as cultivating what I call a voice. In other words, to be assertive, to learn how to speak up for what you want in the face of, let's say, young people, the kids around you that maybe put you down for being older, or you lose a job because you're not as young as you used to be, there are so many possibilities. Individuals who have the ability to say yes and no as if they mean it seem to have a kind of authority. And again, that's encouraging not only to them and to their friends, but to other people.
Yeah, you could very well be speaking of my mother, who died a year ago this coming Tuesday on November 5th. And that might seem, well, she died, at a pretty young age, 84, but
Yes.
Mother could have died 40, 50 years before that for all the problems she had. So if you put it into context, she lived a very long life. She
Yes.
stayed current. She read the newspaper and everything she could get her hand on, books, magazines every day. Was a clipping service for my sister, was always telling us about new things were happening. She stayed connected. She had all kinds of, although she couldn't get out as well towards the end of her life, she stayed connected with people, talked on the phone for people for hours, not, one person, but other people called her. They just liked to call and talk to her, and she would offer whatever it is she could. To us, it was just real practical advice that she gave from her wisdom, and she certainly was in control. It was still her house, and it was still her life, and she was going to do it the way that she wanted to.
And sometimes that's hard for the family to appreciate. But here again is why I think we need conversation on these subjects, because the healthy older person is going to be someone that has a bit of the curmudgeon in them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They're going to be someone, for example, a friend of mine told me about her father, who's in his 90s, and who recently remarried. He's a widow, and he remarried a woman in her 80s. And she said to me, well, Marsha, he's not a particularly spiritual person, but he knows his own mind. And to me, that's a very spiritual trait. It really is. And I give him a lot of credit for having the gumption to take a chance on love and companionship late in life, when people around him probably would have said, oh, what do you want to do that for?
Yes.
So there are all kinds of ways to live out the personal values that we have, the authority that we have, the joy of life, the independence that we have. And you can do that almost anywhere.
You describe earthly life as our season of opportunity to know God and accept God's love so that we may live on and never perish.
That's right. Of course, this is now, in this book, I speak with two voices, and I have a dialogue going on between two characters, where one has the mind of the world and is focusing on the aches and pains and the deprivation of a job and so forth at retirement. And the other one has this more spiritual or ethereal point of view that says, look, this is the chance we've been given. We were born to learn the lessons of the Spirit. And we were born to know God. And this is the framework in which we were created in order to learn that there is no death, in order that death would lose its sting. And I've tried to put that in terms that are not dogmatic, but they are spiritual. There's no getting around it.
And when we learn the lessons of the Spirit, then that will result, won't it, in a spiritual awakening. When you say spiritual hardiness is the strength born of union with divine love or the God of our understanding.
Well, that's right. I don't see how it's possible to have an inkling or an experience, if you will, of eternity, which I think happens when you have a religious life. You sense something more. You see beneath the surface. I don't think it's possible to have that experience and not have a religious awakening, let's say. But I want to say something else, and we were talking a little bit about hardiness. You just mentioned that. It's very interesting to me that if you look at the corporate studies, here again, this is for people who are active, maybe just building a career. You look at the corporate studies of hardiness, and it's a mental component, an attitude of belief, and it's where people believe that they can control certain influences. There again, you have that sense of control. These are individuals who kind of pit themselves against adversity. They like a challenge. Instead of being crushed by the challenge, they gear up for it. They're exhilarated almost by it. And then the third thing, they commit themselves to overcoming the very problems that other people fear. And if you take those three traits, that's exactly what we need as we get older.
And awakening is, you write, not just a solution to the problem of old age, it is the solution.
It is the solution.
Yes.
Exactly. It's the solution for life itself. Because this discussion that we're having, how you meet challenges, well, you're going to have challenges when you get older. There's no doubt about it. You're going to have these tests to face. You're going to need to feel as though you have influence when the whole world tells you that you don't have influence anymore. And this is especially true of individuals who have had a thriving leadership career. Look at Mondale. He's coming back into the fray. And there's a whole group of people. The first thing they said, he's too old.
Yes.
Well, he may be out of touch. I don't know. I haven't followed that. But it's not because of age. Mm-hmm. If someone's 74, to me, that's not old. And there's no reason to be out of touch unless one's psyche is out of touch. That's all it is.
Yes. Let me remind you that you're listening to Amplify on KDKA in Pittsburgh. Our guest is Marsha Sinetar. We're talking about her latest book, Don't Call Me Old, I'm Just Awakening. If you'd like to visit her website, the address is www.Marsha Sinetar, and that's all one word, first name, last name, MarShinetar.com. www.MarshaSinetar.com. MarShinetar. We're also going to open our phone lines now. If you'd like to join us, there's so much more that I want to talk about with Marsha. I always enjoy having her on. But we'll open our phone lines. If you would like to perhaps witness to the fact that your older years or the later years in your life have not been exactly what people said they were, that you have realized some of the joy, the beauty, the sacred depths of life that Marsha speaks about, that it isn't the end of your life, but in many senses it truly has been a beginning. If you have had that kind of experience, we would certainly like to hear it. You can call us locally at 412-333-KDKA, or if you're calling in one of the 38 states or half of Canada, to which we're booming out this Sunday evening, you can call us on the toll-free line and join us there also, so that we can have you be a part of our program. And that toll-free line is the Choice One Communications line, which is 412, it's 877-855-KDKA. So let's get it straight now. Locally, 412-333-KDKA. On the Choice One Communications toll-free line, that's 1-877-855-KDKA. I can tell you, Marsha, one of the things my sister and I never talk about anymore is that we're bored. It seems whenever we say we're bored, all kinds of things begin to happen that we don't like. Yeah. And you point out in your book that boredom is the most costly disease in America, that deadness of spirit, not cancer or coronaries, shortens the life of both the individual and society.
Oh, that's so true. And I know that you you and I can both look into our families, into our friendship circle, our work circle, and find individuals who, although they're physically healthy, it's like Norman Cousins said, you know, the tragedy is not death, but what dies in us while we're alive. I think we can all look around us and see people who have taken a beating in life in some form or fashion, and something in them has died. And this, to me, is so costly, not only in terms of productivity, but we're not widgets. We don't have to keep producing. But in terms of just the enjoyment, the love that we could give to others and to the things that we were born to master. If I could tell you a little story,
Please.
If we have time. This goes back to that voice that I keep talking about, that I think we have to learn all of our lives. It's a lifelong effort to speak up for the things that are important to us. And there was a story that I read in a little magazine, and I've talked about it in Don't Call Me Old. It's about an elderly man who was in a nursing home after surgery.
Oh, yes, I like this story, yes.
And the nurse had set him on the commode and gone away. She had some work to do, and she said, "I'll be right back." Well, time passed, maybe an hour, and she didn't come back. And he kept ringing the bell for her to come back and escort him back to bed, and she didn't come back. And he kept ringing the bell, no answer. So finally, he managed over to the wall phone, crawling over, I guess, and he called 911. And the paramedics came zooming into the hospital, thinking someone had died. And sure enough, there he was, and he got escorted back into bed.
Yes. Soon all the nurses in the world were in his room.
Exactly.
And you relate to it as positive rebellion.
I think it is positive rebellion, because there comes a time in life when it's easy for people who are supposed to be helping us to get the idea that maybe it's okay that we'll wait because we never make a sound.
Mm-hmm.
This is not all right. And you see it all the time in markets and in shops and on the airlines where flight attendants call the elderly dear and sweetie, and they take these little liberties with them. I've seen it too much. So I like that story because it says to me, look, I count too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you feel old, we have to understand, does it make it so that old age isn't what it used to be, that we inhabit an awakening planet, and we have to understand that I am not my pain, much like the opening story that I had.
That's right. I am not my pain, and we are larger than that. In fact, so large that boundless, I would say.
And our projections and assumptions cause problems.
Well, they do cause problems because, for example, the woman that I spoke to recently, she was interviewing me for something, and younger than I am. She was, I guess, in her 40s, you know, and I have met her, and she's a lovely person, but she has a fear of aging, all right? This is an assumption. And the way it caused problems in our discussion is that she could not really get to this conversation. We skirted all the way around it, but we never really discussed the word elderly. You know, we never really discussed some of the opportunities in aging, and I think we didn't discuss it because here's an individual that doesn't want to grapple with the reality that the body is not our home.
Yes.
Heaven is our home. And we are like, I think it was Vanier, the saintly Vanier, I can't think of his name right now, but anyway, I think he was the one that said, heaven is our home, and we on earth are like travelers staying in a hotel and always homesick for our final destination. And that is our final destination if a person has a religious life.
Let's just there are a couple of people who want to join us, and let's do that. But first of all, let me just tie this up a little bit. You were talking about assumptions. Tell us about the law of assumption and how by controlling our assumptions we can expand our happiness.
Well, the law of assumption really was put into place by Jesus. And when he said, as ye believe, so be it unto you. And the law goes something like this, that our assumptions shape our perception, shape our reality. So just as I was saying, if someone is afraid of aging, has the assumption that aging is a bad thing, they're going to take sort of defensive action as opposed to a joyful, spontaneous assertion. And it makes all the difference in the world. If you're afraid of meeting strangers, if you think strangers can't be trusted, we all know people who feel that way about people, that, you can't trust other people. So little by little, their circle of trusted companions shrinks and shrinks and shrinks.
Yes.
And this is the way our assumptions shape our reality. And if we have the assumption that I'm just beginning life, my life is eternal, God has put eternity in my heart, I'm in love with my future. If you have that assumption, just think of what every day would bring to you.
Right, and how much better we will be, you write, if we turn our thoughts to God's thoughts.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, you know how it says in the book of Isaiah, I know the thoughts that God is speaking through Isaiah, and he says, I know the thoughts I think about you. They're thoughts above yours. They're beyond yours. They're not like your thoughts. And the other law about assumption, and it has to do with this very conversation, which is so beautiful, is that whatever you put your attention on is going to grow stronger in your life. So if your attention is on how limited you are because your back hurts or your knees aren't what they used to be or whatever, instead of the opportunity that's opening up on the inside of your experience, that's going to make or break your experience of life.
Right, to feel better, you're right, we need to lift our thought, expand our consciousness beyond anxiety, that our mortal enemy is not any loss we've had, but the thought about our loss.
That's right. In other words, another way of putting exactly that is to say, it's not age that puts us into a bad position, but it's our ideas about age.
Mm-hmm. And so we all need to seek spiritual fitness. While the world is speaking so much about physical fitness, and it truly is important as part of our holistic approach to life,
right,
we can't leave spiritual fitness out of it.
No, because really, the way I would put that is to say this way, even the physical, even getting out for a walk, I would say to you and to the listener and to myself that something good has happened on the inside of me in order to get me out of bed, put my Adidas on, and go out for a walk in the morning when I don't feel like it.
Right.
So, you see what I mean?
Yes, absolutely, because what we think about ourselves in the world, you tell us, becomes our world.
Exactly.
Then many adults feel useless, depressed, or unattractive because they believe they're over the hill.
That's right. And so they believe they're over the hill, so then they shrink back.
Right.
But I'm saying this, that, and this goes to the discussion of assumptions. If I know that something good is happening on the inside of me, this stirs my spirit, and this has already happened to me, this good, this blessing, this grace, it has already happened to me, and because it has already happened, I get up in the morning.
Yes.
I go out in the morning, I put my makeup on or do whatever I need to do, but I'm out of the house doing what I have to do, despite the aches and pains that I might feel. So that's sort of beside the point.
Yes. Okay, I've invited people to join us. Let me do that. Again, our number here is 412-333-KDKA, or toll free on the Choice One Communications line, which is 1-877-855-KDKA. Good evening. You're on Amplify on KDKA. Mary?
Yes, they were talking about bringing some of the old people out of retirement. Well, I was thinking that the other day. Mr. Bush consulted the Reagan administration on some of his positions that he's taking. I thought that was a wise decision, but they're going back and consulting an older generation. And I was thinking the other day, somebody better get all of the functional, older, moral, decent people and try and get them together, because I don't see much hope in this younger generation. But then I live in the city of Pittsburgh, and when I look around every day, all day, I'm retired. I'm 72. I'm slipping a little. I'm still functional, and I still keep up with things, as she said. I keep up with the political things and what's going on in the world, weather conditions and disasters and things, what's going on everywhere. But my point is, the younger generation seems to me to be irresponsible, immature, immoral. They just don't care. They're on drugs, and I am very sad to see this, considering what this country was started out to be and what its hopes for what kind of a country it would be and what kind of people it would have. Like Sir Thomas More's Utopia, a good and upright people.
Yes.
Well, I don't see the good and upright young. Maybe that's because I live in the city, but I'm very sad. And all this noise is like the helicopter going over. I liked it better when everything closed up, was quieted down at 8 o'clock, and didn't do much on Sunday except visit and go to church and try to be moral and set an example. But I am saying to whoever's listening, somebody better try and get the decent, functional people together somewhere. I would put them inside of walled cities and keep the riffraff and the immoral and the undecent outside.
Okay, we're going to respond to that. Why don't you go first of all?
So you want me to?
Yes, please.
Well, I have an idea. First of all, it's a great idea to have people who are so-called retired ask themselves, how might I add value? Because retirement is not for everyone. And then I want to say about the young people, I don't have that perspective at all. Being an ex-teacher, you show me a group of young people, I'll show you as diverse a collection of individuals, all of whom have the potential, assuming they're mentally healthy, have the potential for great good, great love, great compassion. And thirdly, I want to say that if only 5%, and this I've read in one of the studies that went into Don't Call Me Old, if only 5% of the people over 65 would volunteer some time, that would result in over 50 million hours of positive contribution each week.
And there's belief that Generation X wants to do that. I'm like you. Today's youth give me hope. Oh, there are problems out, there's no question.
No question.
But they give me hope, truly. And it's growing in recent months than ever before. It was there before, but to me it's even greater than ever.
Well, since 9/11, I think the younger people, as a matter of fact, the Peace Corps enrollment has been up. I don't know how far up. I think they have like 75% higher enrollment after 9/11. And these are, many of them are young people, not all. The other thing I would say is that since 9/11, you see the hunger on the part of the younger generation to find a way to serve. But I fault, if there's anything wrong with younger people, the fault, Brutus, is with us.
Yes.
We have to look at ourselves and say, the baton, when it was passed to me, the adult, the one who is supposed to inculcate these sacred values in young people, when I had the baton, I must not have passed it along correctly.
Yes, that was failed. Good evening. You're on Amplify on KDKA. Beryl?
Oh, hi. Okay. What I was going to say, I will put on the back burner for a minute just to respond to the lady who has so much problem with the upcoming younger generation. Well, like you, my own experience with the younger generation is they're a mixed bag. We're all a mixed bag, but if you make an attempt to be civil and decent and friendly to them, they are civil and decent and friendly back.
Of course.
This is my experience.
Right.
Okay? If you sort of tune them out, they will tune you out, too.
Right.
Okay. But what I was going to say is, I'm 80, okay. For me, I think a great many people, well, I'm a Catholic, a great many people earlier on in life have read about people who are cloistered nuns, St. Therese, Teresa of Avila, all these people, and they're sort of interested in the lifestyle and the messages, but it's even in a very small way trying to follow these people is very difficult when you're in the middle of raising a family, maybe working a job.
Right.
I think very often older people who are retired, and if, thank God, somehow they have some kind of security, whether it's Social Security or welfare, I don't care. If they have some kind of security, they're in a position where they really can explore some of these ideas, including the idea of, the classic cloistered orders believe very much in, God, I can't think of the word, it's gone out of my head, enclosure, the idea of enclosure, living within a certain enclosed space. You can't do that if you have to work a job, or if you have to get kids to school. If you are if you're an older person, they want to call me old, or if I'm an awakening person, all right, and you have some kind of an income, enough to live on, and you have your own space in this world. If you're lucky enough to have a house or an apartment, you can create a certain amount of enclosure for yourself. Right.
Oh yes, in fact, there's a previous book that Marsha has written about ordinary monks and mystics, right, Marsha?
Right,
So that is another way of approaching it.
Right, and when I think very often people who are retired, let us say, are the only people in this day and age most of the time who are in a position to do that sort of thing.
Well, I completely agree with you, and not only that, but I think the latter part of life is the time to do that. That's what I've been saying, and I think the contemplative life, it does not have to be lived in solitude, although I happen to feel like Einstein said that, solitude, which is a necessity in youth from time to time, becomes like air later in life. You must have it. But you can live a contemplative life in the most, it's so rich, so your outward life might be simple, but your inner life is growing by leaps and bounds. And there is a lavish feeling to it. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's an experiential reality. It's like Thomas Merton once wrote that the problem with most people is that they live in unreality instead of reality. So anyway, I totally agree with the caller, and I congratulate her on that perspective. I think it's a universal perspective.
Good evening. You're on Amplify on KDKA. Chris?
Hi, yes, I'm Chris, and thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Hi.
I would like to respond to the woman who said she was very disappointed with the younger generations. I just think people have to be wary and be concerned about trying to generalize the generations.
Yes.
Because the fact of it is, I attend a church here in Johnstown, and if you would look at some of our younger members, and we have a very active younger members organization, youth group. I was actually walking down the hall today, and a person who was a skateboarder, the typical big clothes and everything, he had on his t-shirt that said, "I skate for Jesus." He's a very active member in the youth group. That's the way he chooses to worship. And I just think the morals, you can't look at someone's clothes and look at them, tell someone's morality, and to tell their goodness and the warmth in their heart for people. So I just think you need to be very wary of categorizing people based upon younger generations, older generations. And I agree with the caller that said you get a mixed bag no matter what.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We thank you for joining us. Marsha, we're coming up to the news. We're going to be taking a break and then coming back. But let's sort of close this off when we talk about people not seeing much hope in the future. You point out that hope flows from living love.
Right.
And if we're to see hope, we need to make sure that we're continuing to live our lives in love and with love, and that hope also is the feeling of God with us. And God with us. And so, as you say, don't call me old, call me awakening.